Scott, thank you for the introduction. I'm here to make the case for reinvention. First, I'd like to share two personal stories with you. When I was being trained as a translator and an interpreter at the Monterey Institute from 1987 to 1989, the word localization never came up. And yesterday I was catching up with Professor Jackie Hammer and Professor Laura Burian. And Jackie was a professor at the Institute when I was a student. I asked Jackie, is it true that the word localization never came up during that time? She said, that's true. And then Laura piped up. She said, I was a student there in the 90s, it never came up. In 2005, the Monterey Institute set up a master's degree in translation and localization management. In the last 10 years, 204 students have graduated. And in the last 2 years, 98% of the graduates found employment by September 1st. The world has changed. In 2008, Language and Solutions made an acquisition of a translation company, Lingo Translation Solutions. When I walked into that business, it was a disorienting experience. Although I had close to 20 years of senior management position in a language company, I found myself having to manage a staff of engineers and QA specialists as large as the project management staff. I literally had to learn to speak a new language very quickly in English. So I'm predicting we have more big changes coming our way at an accelerated speed. Why is that? First, globalization started in the 1950s. And since then, the ratio of international trade as a percentage of national GDP has doubled. And as we know, as international trade increases and as cross-border investment increases, the need for cross-language communication will also increase. Demographics. Today, we have 61 million speakers of a language other than English in the United States. In 5 years, by 2020, it's projected it's going to reach between 64 million to 68 million. So in 5 years, we will see a 5 to 10% growth rate. And yesterday, the government published the latest unemployment stats. Our unemployment rate is at a 7-year low. History tells us when the economy booms in the United States, will immigration go up or down? Up. Technology. It's changing our lives in more ways than we can count. But for language professionals, how does it affect us beyond the fact that we're carrying an iPad as our dictionary rather than books and books of dictionaries? I will talk more about that. And even that slow-moving organism called the government is catching on to how our lives are changed. August last year, the Federal Communications Commission published a mandate for all the wireless companies to enable the phone numbers from their systems to be able to dial 911 by texting. By the end of 2014, the top 4 wireless companies have reached that goal: AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and Sprint. All of their phones in the right areas can now report 911 incidents by texting. Now, let me bring that closer to life. Please raise your hand if you have done interpretation over the telephone. I would say 70% of the audience. Raise your hand if you have ever interpreted a 911 call over the telephone. I would say 40% of the audience, right? Have you ever experienced a scenario where the victim is hiding under the bed or in the closet, talking like this, so the perpetrator will not hear him or her? Have you experienced that? Okay, I see Esther, I see somebody there, and I have experienced that. Okay, so this is what texting is about. We're giving an option to a unique scenario. Now technology allows us to do that. What does it mean to our industry? Our industry is growing. According to the Common Sense Advisory, the size of the global language services industry today is $37 billion. In 5 years, it's going to grow to close to $50 billion. Now, that's a 35% growth rate. You'll be hard-pressed to find any industry that's going to experience that kind of growth rate in the economy. The key point here is there are more opportunities than we can handle for every one of us. Now, here's a twist. There are these little ankle biters who have no business messing with our industry, inserting themselves into our industry. Now, tell me if it's a crisis or an opportunity. I say it's an opportunity. By 2022, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is projecting a 46% growth rate in the interpreter and translator profession. That's a much faster growth rate than other occupations. And yesterday I attended a luncheon, and I happened to sit next to a young lady by the name of Emily Dirk. She's a second-year graduate student at the Monterey Institute, Middlebury Institute. She majors in teaching English as a second language. And she happens to work as a student aide at the Career Development Office. And she said to me, before I came to Monterey, I didn't really quite know the difference between translation and interpretation. But boy, 75% of the jobs that come into our career office are for the translators and the interpreters. Wow, what a booming industry. So again, it's a growth industry, lots and lots of opportunities, if we're ready for it. What this calls for, how do we get ourselves ready for it? It calls for a transformation. Most people think about transformation as that technology thing. No, it's really about changing the skills and behavior. Language Arts CIO Jeff Cordell is sitting in the audience. Why is he sitting here in an interpreter conference? We always say to each other, we each have a job and a half. His full-time job is technology. His other 50% of the job is about people and process. My full-time job is about getting people and process ready for technology. So my other 50% of the job is technology. We all have a job and a half. Now, going into the next layer, how exactly is it affecting us? We used to have these neat boxes containing us. You're an in-person interpreter, you're an on-site interpreter, you're a telephone interpreter, you're a video interpreter, you're a translator, or work in software localization. But the boxes are breaking down. The line separating on-site and remote is becoming blurry because of video interpreting. The line that's separating translation and interpretation is becoming blurry because of the need such as the texting. So what does the future look like? You're looking at one person. And I know when Scott Swanson was developing our 911 texting product, I look at him and say, okay, is this a translator job or an interpreter job? I can't decide. And so we settled on a linguist job. I don't know if that's going to be the name ultimately, but I couldn't even name it. So you have this individual sitting in front of one single system, being able to perform more than one modality. We're moving from single modality to multiple modalities. That's what the future looks like. And I want to share with you a couple of concrete examples that reflect my daily life. First of all, for the last 30 years, the over-the-phone interpretation industry works like this. You have a client calling, they wait to reach an operator who doesn't need to speak a second language, collecting billing information. Once that's finished, they wait to reach an interpreter. Now, we now have the technology to remove one of the waits. Language Line started having interpreters working in our offices so that we can remove the wait for the operator in 2002. That was really not hard to do. Call centers have been in business for decades. But since that time, we put a challenge in front of ourselves. How do we empower the interpreters? How do we create a call center of one so that interpreters anywhere in the world can have the opportunity to provide their services without having to come to one of our offices? And we have achieved that goal. Now we have a system where we can put the system in front of the interpreters wherever they are. That gives our clients the speed, that gives additional opportunities to the interpreters no matter where they are. And how it affects the future is that this single system is going to allow this interpreter to be able to do over-the-phone interpretation, video interpretation, text translation for the 911 agencies, and many, many more other opportunities. The next example is text 911. How this works is somebody's reporting a 911 incident by texting, gets into the PSAP centers, and the interpreter, the linguist, can text back and forth with the LEP and the PSAP dispatcher. And at the same time, the voice line is open. The linguist can communicate with the PSAP dispatcher by voice. What are the benefits for doing this? I want to highlight a couple of key points. Speed. How many times have I heard from doctors, Winnie, I can't wait for the interpreter. I only have 15 minutes per patient. And the worst case I heard was 7 minutes. So the more they wait for an interpreter, the shorter the time they have to help the patient. So the speed does affect patient care. The speed of access affects quality of care. I saw some heads nodding, and I think you have the same experience with the doctors as well. And on top of that, this is about giving the choices to the LEPs so that they can choose the mode that's most appropriate for them. I look at every single one of us here. We are all advocates of equal language access. And if we put our money where our mouth is, we need to strive to provide more and more options to the LEPs. Now, yesterday, Ken Anders made a presentation on technology as a connector. One of the attendees raised the question, okay, I hear you, technology is coming, we need to embrace it. But what does it really mean to me, the linguist? I'm attempting to provide some insights that I have gained. I surveyed our interpreters who have been performing OPI, over the phone interpretation, and video interpretation. I asked them to rate the importance of various skills needed in the various modalities. And my conclusion is, interpreters, beware. Heritage speakers, be even more aware. Why is that? Because the tools that we need in our toolbox, the number has just increased. In addition to the skills that you need, the language proficiency, the note-taking, the short-term memory, all those skills that are considered a given when you provide interpretation service. When you work as an over-the-phone interpreter, you manage your voice. Now, when you move into video interpretation, in addition to managing your voice, now you have to manage your presence. When you get into doing texting translation, these interpreters indicated that the most important thing and the biggest challenge is going to be their written language proficiency in both directions. Now we know it's the industry norm when you translate into your A language. But beware, when you work in texting, you have to translate into both languages. As interpreters, perhaps we didn't have to worry too much about our written proficiency. But now we need to start paying attention to that. I want to reemphasize, there are more opportunities for every one of us here. How should we move forward? First of all, I feel that all of us who are sitting here in the audience, who can come to a conference like this, we are the privileged ones. There are hundreds and thousands of other language professionals who may not have the opportunity to attend a conference like this. So it is our obligation to pay forward, to contribute to the industry. We're going to be entering into a new era. The best thing we can do is to redefine the new norm. Now, my colleagues in Language and Solutions, we're doing that every day because that's our aspiration. We want to lead, we want to redefine the new norm. I encourage you to do the same thing. Associations, individuals, managers of language services programs in the hospitals, we can all contribute to defining the new norm. Let's all be the change, not the victim of the change. And I would like to close by sharing a quote with you. For good ideas and true innovation, you need human interaction, conflict, argument, and debate. And this is what this discussion is all about. So thank you, CHIA, for providing the forum for the interaction. And thank you for including me in the interaction. Thank you.